Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be looking at a new case from Namoki Mods, their pole router case. Now, this is an original design from 1954. The pole router was designed by Gerald Genta, who was just 23 years old at the time. It was an elegant twisted lug, a thin in dimension, clean dial layout, a combination of style, utility, making it instantly recognizable and timeless. It has a radial grooving in the chapter ring. It was featured in the earliest micro-rotor movements, a rich connection to aviation history. It's elegant yet versatile in design, and it's suitable for formal and casual wear. If you are interested in the vintage watches, the Polerouter is often considered an entry point into the classic Swiss horology. Now, obviously, we're not dealing with the original design here. This is Namoki's homage or clomage version of it, and I did put my own little spin on it. I chose a dial that isn't typical with the build. You can do that as well. You can choose any design that you want from them. I love making in-depth and comprehensive reviews for this watch. This is going to be the bracelet that I originally wanted to put on the watch, but it's funny because I built the Alpine and I found that it matched with that better. This is a Jubilee bracelet that I am eventually going to place on the watch once I do the build, and this is a build that I did prior to it. This is more of like a Bell Ross homage that I built prior. There's a video on that if you want to check it out. This is also the Alpine that I did a build on, a new case that they came out with. So if you guys want to check out that video build, I also have a comprehensive build on that. So let's start things off. And that starts off with the movement. We have to make sure that it is functioning. This is an NH35 with a black date wheel. We are going to put this onto the time grapher to make sure that it is running within its parameters of the factory limits. Obviously, make sure that your watch is firing up. We're taking a look at the balance wheel to make sure that it's going on. It is beating within realm of what it needs to be. And I have a movement holder here just to make things a little easier. I do end up switching off to the regular pad just because it gives a little bit more give. Now, when you're taking the dial out, you want to use something like how I just showed. That way you're not compromising that. And then we're going to line up the feet just to make sure it matches up to where we're going to clip the additional feet in the back. So same thing as usual, guys, nothing new here. I like to do a little wiggle. It sometimes clips off the back of the feet very evenly where I don't have to shave things down, but more often than not, we do have to do a shaving on the back of the feet that are going to be removed, and we have to make it flush, or at least I like to make it flush because I don't want there to be any bump or any kind of raising to compromise the hands once the dial is set on there. So again, we're measuring up the other side here and making sure. Now, I always measure twice. I want to make sure that I'm removing the right feet. Yes, I've made the mistake of taking off the wrong one, to which I had to glue back the feet on there, which is a no-no. We don't want to use glue inside here. You can also use a double-sided tape to clip onto the edging of the back of the dial to the movement holder where it's plastic on the side as another alternative if we do clip off the wrong feet. But I happen to measure twice. And of course, after we shave things down, we clean it off with Rodico. We hit it with the dust blower. We want to make sure we get all of those little metal pieces out of the way. We don't want that compromising the movement. We don't want that compromising the dial. So always cleaning in between, especially when we're cutting things off, shaving things down. Guys, the main thing that you want to look out for is dust, is particles. The movements are very sensitive. Anything even microscopical could add to the, or actually I want to say it could decrease the amount of longevity for your movement. So make sure that you're blowing things off, whether it be the little pad that you have there or the mat or whatever the case may be. Now, this is important. I'm pushing down the dial on the edge of the movement. I'm not doing anything in the center, making sure that that dial is completely down and flush. That's the main thing that you want to do when you have the dial being placed onto there. You just want to make sure that that's sitting all the way down so it doesn't interfere more so with the hour hand, right? You want to make sure that that's flush and it goes down all the way. So everything is going to function and work together. We're making sure now that the date is going to turn around. So before you place the hands, if you have a date wheel complication, you want to make sure it's at the 12 o'clock so you know where you're placing your hands to coincide with that complication. So the moment that that date wheel turns over and it actually clicks, I know that that is 12 o'clock. So now I can start placing my hands, obviously start starting with the hour hand. Now, I do make a little bit of a mistake, and this is why I love doing these things, because I want you guys to learn from my mistakes. But we're starting off with the hour hand here, and of course we're going to try and place that as even as we can. You know, you want to be perfect. You want to place this down. You want to make sure you push down far enough. But with the hour hand, you don't want to push it down too far. There's two things that can happen. If you have applied indices, it could foul that if it's long enough. And if it is on top of the dial directly, it will actually scrape it. So now I put the hour hand too far down and I freeze this. Don't do this. Do not remove the hands without guarding the dial. I made that mistake. I did put a tiny little bit of a scratch here, and I try to clean it off thinking that it was maybe dust. It isn't. There is a little bit of a baby scratch on here, so do as I say and not as I do. Protect your dial. If you have to reset the hands, that's not a problem. That's something that's common. That is an applied logo, so we wanted to make sure that it's not going to foul that. There aren't applied indices. They're slightly raised, but they're far enough. But I felt like the hour hand was pushed down too far. I didn't protect the dial. Do as I say and not as I do. And protect your dial if you have to reset your hands at any point in time. So that you would just use a Bergeon plastic cover, or you could just grab a regular plastic and put it on there. I do this in my other videos so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But we do reset the hands. Make sure that they are evenly spaced. Make sure that their minute hand is not fouling the hour hand. Make sure that the minute hand is not sloped downwards, sloped upwards, where it's going to interfere with the second hand. That's another very common mistake when we place the second hand. If the minute hand has a slight bend to it going upwards, it's going to foul the second hand, and the second hand is just going to stop. And then if you force it, of course, these things are very delicate. And then we're testing to see when that date wheel is going to turn over. For me, plus or minus 5 minutes on there is totally fine. I'm now showing you the second hand. Now, this wasn't the second hand that came with the hour and minute hand. I actually wanted some loom on there, even though this is like a sector dial that gives an appearance of being like a pie pan, but it's not. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I needed pink in my collection, and I have a whole bunch of hands, so I actually paired it with a second hand that I was happy with. And again, this is a dress watch, but I did want a little bit of loom on there. And now I'm just making sure that everything is moving properly. We're going to remove the stem. This is a little technique that I do to remove that. Obviously, you don't want to just face the movement downward once you put the hands, because you're going to push things and get things out of whack. So kind of sit it on its side, press the little notch that releases the stem, then lay it down. And then, of course, you see in the background, I'm covering the movement as I clean the case. And cleaning. The case needs to be thoroughly cleaned. We are skipping a lot of the cleaning that I do, but I'm very, very thorough before I case the movement, because once you put everything together, if you do notice that there's a speck of dust, you have to take the movement out. So it becomes a little bit of a hassle. So make sure that you spend a lot of time. Put that case and that crystal up against the light, very close to the light. This way you can see anything. And then, of course, give a blow to the dial before you receive the movement into the case. And afterwards, sometimes you have to give the movement a little bit of love. As you guys can see, it clicked down there. That's because I'm pushing on just the edging, of course. Again, we're not touching the middle with our fingers. We're not touching the middle with any tools. We're only guiding it through the edge, and sometimes it needs a little love, and you guys saw it click down. So now we have the case back. This is something that I also had in my arsenal, which is a transparent or an exhibition case back, if you will. Now, I know the NH35 is nothing to write home about, to look at it, but I just had something in my arsenal. I did forget to request for them to send me a case back. So it does fit for the movement. It does fit for the case, rather. So now we're up to stems. And now I've cut a lot of stems in the past too short. Keep those with you, even if you build your first watch, because the moment you decide to build another watch, you may have a stem that was cut too short for the original purpose for it, but now you repurpose that stem later on for something else. In the NH35, the stems are not transferable to another movement, but it's the most common movement used. So if you're in love with Namoki and you're planning to build more than just one, or even if you're not sure, just keep a stem that you cut too short. and make sure that you keep a little arsenal. And it works out in my favor because I actually find one that I didn't have to shave down too much. This one was pretty much on par. And you want to test to make sure that this is going to function well with the case. Make sure it screws down all the way. Make sure that it comes out of the case and you're able to do all of the keyless work function without any issues. And then you're going to go ahead and remove that stem again, remove it from the crown, and then you're going to use some sort of glue to adhere that to the end of it. Now, that's the only thing that I find with Namoki. They don't include any kind of glue. It's super cheap to purchase one, so it's not the end of the day, but it's always my recommendation. Don't just screw this onto the stem, the crown itself. You want to make sure that you're gluing it. This way, when you're functioning with it, I have some hypo cement there. That way, when you're messing around with the watch, when you're wearing the watch, you don't have a fear of that crown falling off of the stem. So I pour some into the oil dishes that I have here. I get it just on the end. I then screw it back in, and then we're gonna do some cleaning on for the additional residue that's on there. I like to have a nice, clean, finished look. I try to do as best as I can to make it look factory. It wouldn't look nice if there was, you know, some glue sticking out on the edging of the crown. It would be something that you noticed when you pull it out, and it's something that I wouldn't be happy with. So I am going to screw it on here, and I hold the base of the stem with tweezers to give myself more of a grip. I then use this blower to like quickly dry that glue to a certain degree. Of course, you're going to need more time for it to really solidify, but at least we start the process and we get some things going with that solution to make sure it adheres to a certain degree, and then over time it'll kind of get harder and it'll stay, you know, a little bit more secure. So we're gonna go ahead and add some oils, I believe, to the end of it now. Yeah, this is something that I like to do, guys. So your stem is interacting with the keyless works inside the movement. So I do put a little bit of oil on here. I'm not a professional watchmaker. I can't tell you if I'm putting the proper amount. You need very little. Very little goes a long way. The oils do spread. The synthetic oils nowadays are a little bit higher in functioning. So don't go crazy with this if you do add this to your step. We do have metal on metal, so it does help to have that. It's just something that I'm taking from my background of actually disassembling and assembling and my little bit of knowledge of it. And then we'll go ahead and clean off the glue. I probably should have cleaned off the glue before doing the oils, so that way I don't interfere with what I did there. But of course I pull the extra off. I use some Rodico here, and that's pretty much it. We're gonna receive the stem and crown back into the case. I like to hold the case and sometimes bring it inward towards the stem instead of me banging against the sides as it goes in and spreading the oils where I don't want it to be. That's a big thing. Things get over oiled and it becomes a mess. Don't drive yourself crazy. It's probably not going to be the end of the world for the amount that you're putting on there if you do attempt that. And of course we have the gasket, creating that extra water seal. Now we want to make sure we always grease the gasket. That increases the longevity of it. That actually makes it a little bit more water sealed. Over time, your gaskets have to be replaced. It takes years, but what happens is they dry out, they crack, and then they don't function the way that they need to. So greasing them before actually sealing the back of the case prolongs that longevity, makes it more of a water seal, makes it more efficient in doing its job. So it's something that I definitely do. And then I have my little technique where I tap in the sides there. I don't just drop it and put the case back on, because the last thing you want to do is you want to pinch that gasket. Again, compromising the movement, because now where that pinch is created, you're creating an opportunity for water to getting inside of your movement. So I'm just being very thorough. I don't want to scare anybody. I don't want anyone to think, oh, well, this is overwhelming. It's actually not as bad as you think. It's really, really fun to do this. And when you're done with your end product, you are absolutely in love with what your work has done here. So home stretch now, the case back is going on. We are going to screw this down. Now, I don't do this with my maximum strength. I do this just enough where it stops. Then I give it a little bit of a nudge. There's no need for you to over screw the back and thinking that it's going to give it more of a water seal. That's not how it works. You can't actually overdo it and cause some threading issues. So after everything is cased, of course, we're going to check when that turns over. It looks like I'm pretty much -2 or 3 minutes. It's almost perfect, actually, when I did that slow motion. But again, -5, +5 at 12 o'clock is completely acceptable. Don't drive yourself nuts. You're probably not going to get it perfect because you're not a watchmaker, and it's no need for it. We should be in bed and in sleep at that time anyway. But I absolutely love this build. I'm so happy to be able to experience and continue my collaborations with Namoki. All of their parts work seamlessly together and they all are well machined and everything else. So I have no qualms. I love doing these videos from their builds because of that reason. And then we're adding a little bit more grease. Now, this is something that I like to do and I don't think it's necessary, but what I like to do is I add a little bit more grease onto the part here where the crown is going to screw. I think this is called a crown tube to the crown itself. Now, it could be a little bit more gritty. Again, we're talking about metal on metal. Namoki actually have their parts very well machined, so it's very, very minimal. Like, it's not as gritty as it could be. Believe me, I've worked with parts from AliExpress. It's actually pretty smooth, but I like it to be butter smooth. It gives it more of a quality feel when you're screwing the crown on there and off there. And then, of course, again, I'm hitting it with some Rodico just to get a little bit of the excess. I don't even know if it was there. It's just a habit, so I do it anyway. And then spreading that grease around a little bit more on that silicone grease on the crown just for it to get around the grooves completely. And what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is an absolute beautiful build in my opinion. Here it is on my 7¼ inch wrist. If you guys are interested in this build or any other build from Namoki, I'll leave an affiliate link down below for you guys to shop. Now, that won't cost you an extra dime. It just helps out the channel if you are deciding to pick up any parts from them directly. And for full disclosure, Namoki sent me all these parts. They're not asking for anything back. I am appreciative of the collaboration and the opportunity to be able to do these builds to give you guys some value if you are interested in building your own watch. I appreciate you guys for checking in on this build and spending your most valuable asset, which is time. I hope to see you guys in the next one.